The Saturday afternoon sun over Beverly Hills did little to warm the inside of Magnifique. The boutique on Rodeo Drive was a temple of minimalist luxury, a sterile world of white marble floors and polished golden racks. Each piece of clothing hung with deliberate space, an artifact priced for the few. The air itself felt expensive, thick with a respectful silence, broken only by the soft click of heels and the hushed murmurs of the city's elite. Through the flawless plate-glass windows, the ordinary world bustled by, a different universe entirely. Inside, wealth was the language, and veiled arrogance was the dialect. It was a place designed not just to sell clothes, but to affirm status, to quietly separate those who belonged from those who were merely looking. The lighting was surgical, making every diamond sparkle and every shadow seem intentional. James walked in, and the carefully curated atmosphere shifted. He didn't belong, and the store's guardians knew it instantly. At 45, his face was a map of a life lived far from these marble halls, yet his eyes held a calm, observant intensity that was unsettling. He wore simple, dark-wash jeans and a Pima cotton t-shirt, clothes whose quality was a quiet secret, overshadowed by their unassuming style. His shoes, though visibly expensive, were worn from walking on real pavement, not just from the car to the curb. Lawrence, the manager, and Kyle, the store's star salesman, exchanged a look of pure contempt. Their judgment was swift and silent, a shared smirk that dismissed him as new money with no taste, or worse, someone who had wandered in by mistake. James simply stood there, his posture exuding a power they couldn't quite place. Kyle, oozing a false charm that dripped with condescension, glided over to James. He stopped a respectful, yet insulting, distance away, his smile never quite reaching his eyes. "Sir," he began, his voice a smooth purr of practiced disdain, "perhaps the shop next door would be more suited to your style." The pause was a weapon, designed to humiliate, to put James in his place in front of the other patrons, who were now watching with mild interest. The words hung in the air, a public verdict on James's worth. The quiet murmurs in the store ceased, replaced by a tense, uncomfortable silence. It's a feeling that stings more than any physical blow, that feeling of being deemed unworthy by a stranger. If you believe in the power of these moments to define us, please consider subscribing so we can continue to bring these important stories to light. James did not react as they expected. There was no flash of anger, no flicker of embarrassment. He simply held Kyle's gaze for a moment before letting his own eyes scan the room, passing over the expensive displays and the judgmental faces of the staff. His search was methodical, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes landed on a young woman in the back of the store. Emily was quietly arranging a shelf of silk scarves, her posture slightly hunched as if she were trying to disappear. Her presence was a stark contrast to the aggressive confidence of her colleagues. A quiet command cut through the silence as James pointed a steady finger directly at her. "I want her to help me," he said, his voice firm and clear, leaving no room for argument. "Only her." The statement shattered the boutique's rigid protocol, leaving Lawrence and Kyle visibly irritated and Emily frozen in disbelief. Emily's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence. To be singled out was a nightmare. In her 2 years at Magnifique, she had perfected the art of being invisible, a quiet shadow moving between silk and cashmere, her presence tolerated but never acknowledged. Now, every eye in the store was on her as she walked across the vast expanse of white marble. The floor felt like a frozen lake, and she was terrified the ice would crack with each hesitant step. Lawrence's glare was a physical force, boring into her back, while Kyle's smirk seemed to widen with her discomfort. She felt a familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. This man, this stranger, had unknowingly thrown her into the lion's den, and she had no idea why she was chosen for the sacrifice. When she finally stood before him, James offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. His calmness was a strange island in the sea of her panic. He didn't look at her with the dismissive appraisal of the usual clientele. Instead, his gaze was direct and surprisingly gentle, as if he were looking past the simple black uniform and seeing the person inside it. He completely ignored the simmering hostility from the other staff members. "My name is James," he said, his voice low and even. "I was hoping you could help me today." He didn't ask for her name right away, giving her a moment to breathe, a small courtesy that felt monumental in a place where such gestures were non-existent. It was the first time a customer had treated her as an equal, not just a function. Gathering her composure, Emily managed a small, shaky, "Of course, sir, I'm Emily." James then gestured vaguely toward a glass case. "I'd like to see the Celestial Collection," he requested, naming the boutique's most ostentatious and guarded line of accessories. A flicker of panic returned to Emily's eyes. Handling those pieces required manager approval, a rule designed to keep associates like her away from the most valuable inventory. She glanced nervously toward Lawrence, who gave a sharp, irritated nod, his expression making it clear this was an indulgence he would not forget. With trembling hands, she unlocked the case, the soft click of the lock echoing loudly in the tense room. She carefully placed a diamond-encrusted handbag on the velvet-lined counter, its price tag representing more money than she had ever seen. James barely glanced at the bag. His focus remained entirely on her. "And it's beautiful," he commented, his eyes never leaving hers. "But tell me, Emily, what does a person even do with something like this?" The question was so unexpected, so contrary to the usual fawning over luxury, that it caught her completely off guard. Before she could formulate a practiced sales response, he continued, his tone softening with genuine curiosity. "What do you dream about? If you had all the money in the world, and you never had to set foot in this store again, what would you build for yourself?" The inquiry was so personal, so deeply human, that it momentarily shattered the artificial reality of Rodeo Drive, creating a small, private space just for the two of them. The question unlocked something within her. The carefully constructed walls of professional deference began to crumble, and for the first time she spoke from the heart. "A bookstore," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, as if saying it aloud might make it vanish. "A small one, with a little cafe inside. It would have worn out armchairs and the smell of old paper and fresh coffee. A place where people could feel quiet, where they could feel welcome, no matter what they were wearing or how much money they had." As she spoke, a faint, genuine smile touched her lips, a rare sight that illuminated her face with a warmth that Magnifique had long tried to extinguish. She was describing not just a business, but a sanctuary. James listened to every word, his expression unreadable, but his attention absolute. He saw it then, the unwavering core of decency that had survived in this cold, transactional world. Her dream wasn't of mansions or private jets. It was of creating a space of kindness and community. It was a dream that valued human connection over material wealth. In her quiet, heartfelt confession, he found the confirmation he was searching for. He had returned to this place seeking a flicker of the humanity he had once been denied, and he found it burning brightly in the heart of this overlooked young woman. Her simple dream was more valuable than everything in the entire store, and he knew his purpose was now clearer than ever. His own expression shifted, a shadow of a long-buried pain crossing his features. He leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "Let me tell you a story, Emily," he began, creating an intimate pocket in the vast, silent boutique. "Imagine a man, 5 years ago. He's standing right outside that door, on a day much like this one. The sun is hot, and he hasn't had a clean drink of water in 2 days. He isn't asking for a handout, not for money or food. He's just desperately thirsty. He sees the people inside, living in another world, and he takes a chance. He just asked the man at the door for a simple glass of water. Emily's breath hitched in her throat. The details were too specific, too real. The memory, which she had pushed to the back of her mind, came rushing forward with startling clarity. She remembered that day perfectly. The searing heat rising from the pavement, the cruel, dismissive gesture from Lawrence as he shooed the disheveled man away, and Kyle's snickering comment about cleaning up the trash. She remembered the profound sense of shame and helplessness she felt, an ache of shared humanity that her colleague seemed immune to, her eyes, wide with a dawning and terrible understanding, filled with tears. She saw the man's face in her mind, his eyes pleading, his dignity stripped away by their casual cruelty. She looked from the memory in her mind back to the man standing in front of her. The pieces clicked into place with a devastating emotional force. The story wasn't hypothetical. It was a confession. It was a shared secret that now bound them together across an impossible gulf of time and circumstance. "I remember," she whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I brought him a bottle of water. I had to sneak out the back so Lawrence wouldn't see me." In that moment of shared vulnerability, James's own internal conflict resolved. His quest was no longer about punishing the guilty, but about rewarding the kind. These moments of quiet compassion are what truly shape our world. If you believe in celebrating these acts of kindness, your subscription allows us to keep telling these vital stories. The emotional charge of the moment was shattered by the sharp click of expensive shoes approaching them. Lawrence had seen enough. The sight of an employee crying while speaking to a potential high-value client was an unforgivable breach of protocol. His face was a thunderous mask of controlled rage as he smoothly inserted himself into the conversation, positioning his body to block Emily from James's line of sight. He placed a proprietary hand on the glass counter, his knuckles white. "Sir," he said, his voice a low growl coated in a thin veneer of professional courtesy, "I must apologize for this unprofessional display. It seems our associate is not feeling well." He shot a venomous look over his shoulder at Emily, a silent command to disappear. Kyle, ever the opportunist, began to drift closer from the other side of the store, sensing a moment of weakness he could exploit. Lawrence, however, was determined to reclaim control of the situation himself. He turned his full attention back to James, his smile now a predatory baring of teeth. "Emily is one of our newer team members. Still in training," he lied smoothly. "She is not authorized to assist with the Celestial Collection. For a client of your stature, it is imperative that you receive expert service. I will personally handle your purchase from this point forward to ensure your experience is nothing short of magnificent." The words were meant to flatter James, while simultaneously humiliating Emily, casting her as incompetent and insignificant. The tension in the boutique drew in on itself, becoming a palpable force. The few other patrons had abandoned all pretense of shopping and were now watching the confrontation with undisguised curiosity. The hushed whispers had ceased, and the air was thick with anticipation. The scene had transformed from a simple sale into a public spectacle, a raw display of power dynamics playing out on the pristine marble floor. Emily stood frozen behind Lawrence, feeling smaller and more helpless than ever before. James, however, remained utterly still. He didn't acknowledge Lawrence's interruption. His gaze remained fixed on Emily, a silent, unwavering anchor in the brewing storm. His silence more powerful than any shout. Just as Lawrence's hand was about to make contact with Emily's arm, James raised his own hand, a simple, quiet gesture that brought the entire boutique to a dead halt. The authority in that small movement was absolute, more powerful than any shout could ever be. Lawrence froze, his condescending words dying on his lips. The air grew impossibly still, every person in the room holding their breath. James finally broke his silence, his voice no longer a gentle inquiry, but a resonant, commanding tone that filled every corner of the sterile space. He looked past Lawrence, past Kyle, and addressed the room as a whole, his gaze sweeping over the silent, watching faces. 5 years ago, he began, each word landing with deliberate, crushing weight. I was standing right outside that door. I was the man you all saw. He then turned his gaze directly onto Lawrence and Kyle, pinning them in place with an intensity that made them physically recoil. The color drained from their faces as a flicker of horrified recognition ignited in their eyes. I was the homeless man you denied a simple glass of water, James stated, his voice devoid of anger, replaced instead by a cold, factual clarity. The man you called trash and told to get away from your beautiful store before he scared off the real customers. You don't recognize me without the dirt and the desperation, do you? It's amazing what a shower and a decent meal can do. He paused, letting the weight of his identity settle upon them. Emily gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth as the final, impossible pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, her entire body trembling with the revelation. James let the silence stretch for another beat before delivering the final, decisive blow. He straightened to his full height, and the unassuming man who had walked in an hour ago was gone, replaced by someone who radiated an unshakable power that had nothing to do with clothes or money. You were right about one thing, he said, his eyes still locked on the two men. I don't belong here, not in the world you built. My name is James Anderson, and as of 9 o'clock this morning, I am the new majority owner of this entire retail chain. The collective, silent shock in the room was a physical force, a wave that washed over everyone. Lawrence's jaw hung open, his carefully constructed world shattering into a million irreparable pieces around him. Kyle looked as if he might faint. With the power dynamic now irrevocably inverted, James issued his first directive as owner. His voice was calm, almost gentle, which only made the words more devastating. Lawrence, Kyle, you are both fired. Effective immediately. Please have security escort you out. He didn't wait for a response, turning his back on them as if they no longer existed. He then faced Emily, whose face was streaked with tears of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. A genuine warmth entered his eyes as he spoke to her. And Emily, he said softly, I would like you to be the new general manager of this flagship store. Your first task will be to rewrite the employee handbook. I want the first and only rule to be a lesson you taught me 5 years ago. Treat every single person with dignity. The boutique remained frozen in a state of stunned silence as 2 security guards quietly appeared and escorted the pale, trembling forms of Lawrence and Kyle out the door. James stood with Emily, giving her a moment to absorb the tectonic shift that had just occurred in her life. Her dream of a small, kind place hadn't just been heard. It had been given the power to transform this temple of cold luxury from the inside out. A single act of kindness, a bottle of water given without expectation, had returned to her 1,000-fold, proving that the most valuable investments we can ever make are in each other. It is for the sake of moments like this, to witness kindness be rewarded in a world that so often overlooks it, that we are so grateful for your subscription, which allows these stories to be told. In the months that followed, Magnifique underwent a quiet revolution. Under Emily's guidance, the sterile white marble of the boutique began to feel less like a museum and more like a welcoming space. The oppressive silence was replaced by the gentle hum of genuine conversation. She didn't just rewrite the employee handbook. She rebuilt the store's soul from the ground up. Training sessions were no longer about aggressive sales tactics, but about learning to see the person behind the wallet. She hired staff based on their capacity for empathy, not their hunger for commission. The store's clientele changed too. It remained a place of luxury, but the arrogance that once defined it had evaporated, replaced by an atmosphere of mutual respect. Emily had unknowingly been building her dream bookstore all along. She just needed someone to hand her the keys to a grander library. Their work, however, extended far beyond the gilded doors of Rodeo Drive. Together, James and Emily established the Dignity Forward Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to providing resources for the homeless community. It was a partnership built on a shared memory of a simple bottle of water. James provided the funding, a silent force of capital, while Emily provided the heart, designing programs that offered not just shelter and food, but job training, mentorship, and placement within the retail chain's network. Former storerooms in several locations were converted into resource centers where people could get a clean shower, a new set of clothes for an interview, and a conversation with someone who saw their potential, not their predicament. Their mission was simple: to give others the same second chance that life had given them. For James, the foundation became the final step in healing a wound that no amount of money could ever touch. The ghost of the thirsty man at the door finally faded, replaced by the reality of the man he had become, a benefactor, a mentor, a quiet force for good. He was no longer a recluse hiding behind his wealth, but an active participant in building a better world. Emily, in turn, blossomed into the leader she was always meant to be. The timid, hunched posture was gone, replaced by a confident grace. Her kindness was no longer a liability to be hidden, but her most celebrated asset, the very cornerstone of her success. She commanded respect not through fear, but through an unwavering decency that inspired everyone around her to be better. The story of what happened at the Beverly Hills flagship became a quiet legend in the retail world, a testament to a different way of doing business. True luxury, they proved, was not found in a price tag, but in the quality of human connection. The future they were building was one where a person's worth was measured by their character, not their credit line. It was a future where a simple act of compassion could ripple outward, transforming lives, businesses, and communities in ways no one could have ever predicted. Seeing a life change so completely because one person chose kindness reminds us of the power we all hold. Thank you for subscribing and for being a part of a community that believes in sharing these powerful truths.